My name is Josephine Larkspur, and I know the exact moment my daughter stopped seeing me as her mother and started seeing me as a bankus. It was a Monday morning, the kind that feels too quiet. You know the type when the sun rises soft and the kettle whistles a little louder than usual. I sat at the kitchen table in my usual seat beside the window, where light filters through the curtains like memory. I'd just opened the envelope from the bank, one of those monthly statements that used to feel boring until it turned my heart cold. There it was. Princess Aegean Cruise Lines, $42,119. 28. I blinked. Read it again. The number didn't change. I felt the stillness before I felt the anger. That strange kind of stillness that comes only when something sacred has just been shattered. I didn't need to guess. I knew. Catherine, my daughter, had visited me 3 weeks earlier. She brought flowers unusually pink and smiled too much. I remember now how she'd reached across the counter and said, "Oh, let me help you clean up, Mom," and picked up my wallet without asking. She'd held it in her hand, stared a little too long, set it down with a grin that didn't meet her eyes. I should have noticed. But sometimes mothers choose blindness over pain. Back at the table, I folded the statement, placed it beside my tea, and stared at the wall. Not crying, not angry, just awake. You see, I used to work as a forensic accountant. I spent decades helping families untangle messy inheritances and fraud. I know how people lie with money, how they rationalize theft as need or entitlement or punishment. But I never imagined it would be my daughter. Catherine was my only child. I raised her alone after Richard passed. She was 6 when he died, small and defiant, with the same dark curls and sharp tongue. I gave her everything: piano lessons, books, clothes I couldn't afford, a roof I built with overtime hours and no vacations. I gave her room to fail, and more than once I gave her second chances she didn't deserve. But this wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. I didn't call her. I didn't scream. Instead, I opened my drawer and pulled out a small black voice recorder, the kind people forget exists. Then I picked up the phone. "Hello, this is Josephine Larkspur. I need to report a card as lost. Yes, I believe there has been fraudulent activity. Yes, I'm calm. But I'd like to file this on record and request a formal fraud investigation." The woman on the line was efficient. She asked questions. I gave clear, crisp answers. I even mentioned that I suspected the person responsible was a family member. "Do you want to press charges, ma'am?" she asked. "Not yet," I replied. "Let's just flag the account for now." And then I smiled. Because it had begun. People think revenge means shouting, slamming doors, storming courtrooms. But the most effective revenge is quiet, clinical, legal. That afternoon, I took a walk. The air smelled like spring, but I felt winter inside me. I passed Mrs. Donnelly watering her roses and waved politely. I passed the park where I used to take Catherine when she was 4. I remembered how she'd hold my hand, then let go and run to the swings, laughing like betrayal was something no child could understand. I wish I could say I didn't see this coming, but deep down I did. This was just the crescendo of a long, quiet symphony of selfishness. Later that night, I opened social media. Catherine had posted a photo. She stood on the deck of a yacht wearing oversized sunglasses, a flute of champagne tilted toward her grinning lips. The caption read, "Living the life I deserve. Freedom. Ocean escape earned it." No mention of who paid. No mention of whose trust she broke. No mention of me. And still I didn't call her. I poured myself a cup of chamomile tea, sat down at the same kitchen table, looked at her photo again. She looked happy, oblivious, entitled. I let myself feel the burn in my throat, the throb behind my eyes, but only for a moment. Then I took a deep breath and wrote in my notebook, "Do not confront, do not accuse, let the paper trail do the talking," because she thinks I'm old. She thinks I'll forget. She thinks love makes me weak, but she's forgotten who raised her and what I used to do for a living. She's forgotten that numbers don't lie, and silence doesn't mean surrender. Not in my house. The thing about watching someone lie to you is once you finally see it, you can't unsee it. It colors everything, like dust on glass you once thought was clean. I spent the next day in silence. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because silence was necessary. Silence is what let me hear everything else more clearly. While Catherine posted yacht pictures, I made a second call to the fraud division directly. This time, I used phrases I knew would trigger attention. My card was used to book a high-value international trip I did not authorize. The user may be a relative. I can supply documentation and a timeline. I spoke calmly. No drama. Just facts. That's the thing about dignity. It doesn't panic. The woman on the phone, her name was Claire, lowered her voice when I said relative. She had the kind of tone women use when one of us knows another woman's been wronged. I'll flag the transaction as under investigation, she said. And if the merchant hasn't processed it fully yet, we may be able to delay release of funds. May I ask, did you confront the person? No, I said simply. I prefer the process. She paused. I could hear the smile in her breath. I understand. After hanging up, I pulled out the little red folder I used to keep my old tax receipts in and began organizing evidence, screenshots, dates, the cruise company, Catherine's Instagram story with the date stamp, the bank statement, her text from 3 weeks ago that read, "Love you, Mom. You're the best," sent exactly 1 day after she took the card. I printed it all, stapled it, labeled it, for legal. That evening, the world continued like nothing had changed. The grocery store smelled like fresh bread. The mailman waved. My neighbor's wind chimes clicked like an old memory. And I sat in the glow of the kitchen light watching Catherine's online gallery bloom. She was on the ship now. She and 2 girlfriends in designer swimsuits. A sunset over clear blue water. A lobster dinner captioned, "Manifested this. Blessed success mindset." She had no idea I was watching. You know, when she was younger, she used to say, "You worry too much about money, Mom." As if that concern hadn't put her through private school. As if cautiousness hadn't kept a roof over our heads when Richard died and left nothing but insurance paperwork and his high school letterman jacket. Now she was bragging about manifesting a life built on someone else's credit. That night, I listened to an old voicemail from her back when she was in college. She was crying, needing money for rent. I wired it within the hour. I remember skipping groceries for myself that week just to cover it. She never remembered that. But I do. The next morning, I received an email from the bank. Fraud activity. Account temporarily frozen. Pending investigation. It worked faster than I thought. Catherine wouldn't find out until she tried to use the card again. And when she did, it would decline. And she would panic. But I wasn't celebrating. I was preparing. That evening, I walked into my bedroom closet and pulled down a shoebox I hadn't opened in years. Inside was a file marked, "Contingency, Catherine." Yes, I had kept one, not because I expected this, but because I had watched her pattern unfold too many times. She would apologize, cry, take again. It wasn't malice. It was entitlement. And I had enabled it for too long. In that file were copies of joint account closures, missed debt notices she swore she'd handle, and a printed email from when she'd used my address to apply for a line of credit just to get approved faster. This cruise wasn't an anomaly. It was just louder. I added the new papers to the file, labeled them maritime theft, and slid it back into the box. That night, I poured a glass of wine and allowed myself 1 full hour of grieving. I sat in the dark. No music, just the sound of cicadas, and let myself cry, not for the money, but for the fact that I now knew who she really was, and what I had allowed. At 11:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was Catherine. The text said, "Hey, Mom. Trying to use the card, but it's acting weird. Did the bank do something? Can you check? Love you." I stared at it for a long time. I could have replied. I could have played dumb, or angry, or motherly. Instead, I did something better. I archived it. And then I turned off my phone. Let her twist. Let her wonder. This time, I was going to let the silence speak. When I woke the next morning, the house was unusually quiet even for me. It was that kind of silence that presses against the skin, like something is waiting to be said. But I had no intention of saying anything. I made my coffee slowly. The old percolator gurgled like it always had. I toasted a slice of rye bread, added a swipe of apricot jam, and sat at the kitchen table facing east, where the sun turned everything the color of honey. My phone sat face down beside me like a sleeping dog. I didn't touch it. By now, Catherine had likely tried to use the card at least 3 more times. She was probably on the cruise sitting poolside wondering why her drinks weren't going through. Maybe she'd asked a concierge. Maybe they'd informed her the account was frozen. Maybe she'd pretended to be confused. I didn't care. Not anymore. Instead, I opened an old photo album. The one with the fraying red cover. The first image was of me holding Catherine as a baby. Her fists curled, eyes squeezed shut, swaddled in a yellow blanket. I was only 29 in that picture, a widow in training. It's strange how fast motherhood teaches you how to survive pain with a straight face. I flipped to a page where she was 8, standing in a little recital dress holding a violin like it was made of glass. She'd hated the lessons. I made her stick with it anyway. I thought I was teaching her discipline. But I realize now I was trying to teach her to care about something more than herself. I don't think it worked. Later that day, I received a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer. Then another. Then a third. When I finally picked up the fourth one, I said nothing. Just listened. It was Catherine. Mom, Mom, can you pick up, please? I don't know what's going on. The card's frozen. I can't book a flight. I can't pay the hotel. Everything's locked. I think there's some kind of mistake. Can you call the bank? Her voice cracked halfway through. Not with fear, with frustration. The entitlement came through like static. I hung up. Not out of cruelty, but clarity. Sometimes love means letting someone collapse under the weight of their own decisions. Later that evening, I received a voicemail. It was her again this time, calmer rehearsed. Mom, hey, sorry if I worried you earlier. I think the cruise company might have messed something up. Could you just give them a call and verify that everything's okay? It'll only take a minute. Please. It was always only a minute. Only a signature. Only a little favor. But this time I wasn't giving it. Instead, I logged into my bank's fraud portal and reviewed the latest update. The report was officially flagged as under internal investigation. The bank was contacting the cruise line directly to dispute the charge. If Catherine had tried to argue it was her own card, she was going to have a hard time explaining why the address on file was mine, why her name wasn't on the account, and why the photos she'd posted matched the time of the transaction. I didn't need to build the case. She had already done it for me. Still, something inside me ached not for her, but for myself. For the fact that this was what our relationship had become. I walked to the back porch and sat in my old wicker rocker. The cushion was faded, the breeze soft. I closed my eyes and remembered a moment I hadn't thought of in years. Catherine was 5. She'd been caught stealing a candy bar from the corner store. I marched her back to the clerk, made her apologize, made her pay with her allowance. That night she wrote me a note in crayon. I'm sorry, Mommy. I won't be a stealer again. I love you. I'd folded that note and kept it in my nightstand for years. But I had thrown it out the day she turned 22 and drained $6,000 from our shared emergency account to fund a trip to Ibiza. When I confronted her back then, she cried, told me she needed to feel alive. I paid the overdraft and never spoke of it again. And now here we were. At 8:43 p.m., I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. Hi, Ms. Larkspur, this is Madeline. I'm a friend of Catherine's. I just wanted to let you know she's okay, but she's a bit stuck right now. I think she used your card and didn't tell you. She said you were cool with it, but I don't know. I thought maybe you should know. My fingers hovered over the screen. I didn't respond. Instead, I took a screenshot. I printed it, added it to the red folder, labeled the page. Witness M. The thing about being quiet is, people think you're not watching, that you won't do anything, that your silence is softness. But I was gathering. Every message, every post, every thread. Catherine had always been clever, but she forgot I was trained to follow trails. Not emotional ones, financial ones. And hers led straight to one conclusion. This wasn't the first time she'd stolen from me. It was just the first time I let her feel it. The next morning, I began my day exactly as I had the last, with silence. The phone was still lighting up with texts. A dozen more messages had come in, some from Catherine, some from unknown numbers I suspected were friends of hers. A few were neutral, but most had that same undercurrent. Urgency dressed in guilt. She's stranded. It's a misunderstanding. You're her mother. That last one stung. Yes, I am her mother. But I'm not her fool. I didn't respond. Not yet. I had something more important to do. I walked to my office and sat down at the same desk I used to balance accounts for other families. The mahogany wood had deep scratches from decades of work. It smelled faintly of cedar and ink. I opened my laptop, logged into my bank portal, and downloaded every statement from the last 18 months. Every charge, every transfer, every slip. I wasn't just going after the $42,000 cruise. I was checking if this was just the latest fire, or if the house had been smoldering beneath my feet for years. And sure enough, it had. 5 months ago. $849. Boutique clothing store in a city I've never visited. 3 months ago, $1,200 wellness retreat deposit. Last December, $600 private chef experience charged to a hotel suite reservation. I'd never questioned these before. They blended into the noise of my life, things I assumed were mine, things I half remembered. But now, with clarity as my weapon, I saw the pattern. She'd been dipping into my account like it was her inheritance. And in her mind, maybe it was. My hands moved quickly. I created a spreadsheet and began building timelines matching posts from her social media with transactions. For every bikini-clad brunch photo, there was a charge. For every sunset selfie, a 5-star hotel. I printed it all, stapled it, label, timeline of misuse. By the time I looked up, it was nearly noon. I hadn't eaten. I didn't feel hungry. I felt alert, sharp, clear in a way I hadn't in years. It's strange what betrayal does. Not just emotionally, but intellectually. It reactivates something ancient in you. Survival instinct, maybe. Or justice. Later that day, I returned to the bank. In person. I wore a soft beige blouse and a dark skirt. My hair pinned neatly. I looked like someone's grandmother. I felt like someone's reckoning. The banker, a young man named Devin, greeted me politely. I could tell he was new, the way he adjusted his tie too often and over-explained simple things. I'm here to submit supporting documents for a fraud claim already in motion, I said, sliding the red folder across the desk. He blinked at the label. Of course, Ms. Larkspur. Would you mind if I scan these in now? Not at all, I said. Please take your time. As he scanned each page, his posture changed. First casual, then upright, then very still. He didn't say anything about the social media screenshots, or the cruise photos, or the text from Catherine's friend. But when he looked up, his expression had sobered. I'll attach these to the internal case file. Our fraud department will escalate this immediately. Do you want to pursue prosecution? That word prosecution hung in the air like a match above gasoline. I paused. No, I said finally. Not yet. I want her to stew in the consequences first. Freeze the card. Let the system work. He nodded. You're doing the right thing. I didn't need his validation, but I appreciated it. As I stood to leave, Devin handed me a printed confirmation of the case ID. Thank you, I said, turning toward the door. Then stopped. Turned back. One more thing, I added. If she tries to call pretending to be me, don't believe her. She's good at sounding innocent. Devin nodded again, slower this time. Understood. Outside, the air smelled like wet concrete and spring flowers. It had just rained. The street shimmered. Everything looked cleaner. I walked home with a calmness I hadn't felt in years. Not because I'd won, but because I was done pretending I hadn't lost something long ago. That evening, I received another text. From Catherine. Mom, I know you're mad, but this is too far. I'm literally stuck here. You're freezing your own daughter out of her life. How can you do that and still call yourself a mother? I stared at the message. Then I opened the Notes app on my phone and began writing a reply, not to send, but to save. Here's what I typed. Being a mother used to mean sacrificing everything so you could live well. Now it means enduring your theft in silence. No, Catherine, I'm still your mother, but I'm no longer your victim. I closed the app, left the text unsent, because some things are better heard through consequences, not replies. The next day, the calls stopped. That alone was telling. The silence after the storm is always revealing. Not because it brings peace, but because it shows who is only making noise and who truly meant to stay. No apologies. No reckoning. Just absence. It was as if Catherine and her entourage had moved on to the next possible rescuer. I sat in my sunroom that afternoon, a soft breeze threading through the open window, the scent of cut grass rising like memory. The same chair I used to rock her in now cradled only me. In my lap, a thin folder rested open. Fraudulent use, primary evidence log. Call it dramatic, call it overprepared, but every name, every receipt, every screen capture was now neatly organized and numbered. What was once maternal guilt had become legal clarity. I opened her Instagram again quietly without liking or engaging. She hadn't posted in 48 hours. Odd. For someone so addicted to validation, silence was a scream. I checked the cruise company's page. No recent activity. But in the tagged photos, I saw it. A blurry group picture of passengers standing near a luxury hotel on one of the islands. And there she was, Catherine off to the side, arms crossed, lips tight. No champagne this time. It was clear even from the pixels. The sparkle was gone. I zoomed in on her face. Not to gloat, but to study. What I saw wasn't shame. It was disbelief. That's what finally struck her. Not the inconvenience, not the embarrassment, but the idea that I, her mother, had limits. She never thought I'd act. She believed, as she always had, that I would absorb the blow, clean the mess, and somehow thank her for the lesson. But this time, I wasn't interested in teaching her anything. I was interested in protecting what was left of me. That evening, I received an email from the bank's fraud division. Subject: Notice of temporary freeze conversion to permanent closure. The report had been reviewed, the evidence deemed sufficient. The account was officially closed. Funds would not be released. Further investigation pending. Client does not wish to prosecute at this time. There it was. Official, cold, legal. I printed the email, slipped it into the final sleeve of the folder, and labeled it closure. At 9:22 p.m. my landline rang. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Hello. I kept my tone light, like I was answering an old friend. Mom, Catherine's voice came through, cracked and dry. Why are you doing this? I didn't reply. She went on. Do you have any idea what's happened? They shut down my accounts. My cards don't work. I tried to explain, but the bank said it's out of their hands. They said there's an investigation. Still, I stayed silent. Do you know what it's like to be stranded? To be treated like a criminal? I'm your daughter. Yes, I said finally, calmly. You are? She paused. Then why? Because I've been stranded before too, Catherine. Stranded in my own kitchen while you drained the last of my account. Stranded in guilt when you cried to me after every mistake. Stranded in silence every time I knew you were lying and loved you anyway. Her voice dropped. So this is revenge? No, I said. This is reality. You're just not used to seeing it from the other side. She scoffed. Wow, you're cold. No, I repeated, firmer. I'm clear. There's a difference. Then I added, you used to be someone I would have done anything for. I still might have, if you had just asked. Click. I hung up. Not because I was angry, but because the conversation had ended years ago and we were just now catching up to it. Afterward, I stood at my front door for a long time. The night was quiet, the sky bruised with stars. I watched as a moth flitted toward the porch light, circling something it couldn't quite land on. Much like Catherine, drawn to warmth, she mistook for weakness. I turned off the light, let the darkness reclaim its peace. Because now the real silence had begun, and I had never felt more awake inside it. The following day, the sun rose like nothing had changed. But everything had. I didn't go online. I didn't check the news or social media. Instead, I went into the garden. There's something sacred about pulling weeds. The quiet resistance of roots. The satisfaction of removal. It's a metaphor too perfect to ignore. As I worked, I thought about my mother. She used to say, people show you their character in how they handle your silence. And now in mine, Catherine had shown me everything. By late morning, I received a letter in the mail, an actual letter, handwritten. It was postmarked from a small coastal town. I opened it slowly, sitting at the same kitchen table where this all began. The handwriting was familiar, sloppy, rushed. Mom, I don't know what to say. I feel like you blindsided me. I know I shouldn't have used your card, but I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I figured you'd just talk to me if you were upset. Now I'm being treated like some kind of criminal. I can't even rent a car. My friends have all gone home. I'm alone here, and I can't afford the flight back yet. Please just call me, or wire me something so I can get home. I'll explain everything when I see you. I swear. Love, Cat. There was no apology, only deflection, excuses wrapped in passive voice. She didn't say, I stole from you. She said, I shouldn't have used your card. She didn't say, I'm sorry I lied. She said, you blindsided me. I folded the letter carefully and slid it into the red folder. Label. Deflection. No accountability. I didn't cry. There was nothing left to mourn. That afternoon I sat down and wrote something of my own. Not to her, but to myself. I will not finance my own betrayal. I wrote it 3 times, out loud. Then folded it, placed it in the folder's front sleeve above everything else. This was not revenge. It was resolution. Around 4 p.m., I received a call from the bank again. Claire, the same fraud investigator. Her voice was different this time. More measured. Professional but with undertones of concern. Ms. Larkspur, I'm calling to inform you that we've finalized our investigation. The cruise company has agreed to reverse the charge, and your account has been credited the full amount. Additionally, we've placed your daughter's profile under flagged status for financial fraud. Should she attempt to open accounts with institutions that share our network, there will be alerts. I nodded slowly. Thank you. There's one more thing, Claire said, voice softening. You're within your rights to pursue charges or to take civil action for reimbursement of the other unauthorized purchases. We can assist if you wish. I paused. I imagined courtrooms, lawyers, media. I imagined Catherine crying. I imagined myself being portrayed as cold, but none of it mattered anymore. No, I said. I'm not interested in punishment, just protection. Claire exhaled gently. Understood. Your strength is admirable. I hung up, and for the first time in a long time, felt untethered. Not in a lost way, in a free way. That night, I cooked myself dinner, nothing extravagant. Just roast chicken, rosemary potatoes, a glass of wine. And I lit a candle, not for ceremony, but for remembrance. Not of Catherine, but of the version of me who would have looked the other way. She was gone now. And in her place was a woman who had finally remembered how to say no. I ate slowly, savoring everything. The salt, the quiet, the dignity. At 9:12 p.m., another text came in. From Catherine. Just want to say I'm really disappointed in you. I needed help and you turned your back. I'll never forget this. I read it once, then deleted it. Because if she never forgets, good. Neither will I. 2 days passed. No calls, no texts, no letters. The silence had evolved. It was no longer an absence. It had taken on a shape. It filled the room like furniture you hadn't noticed before. It made space for me, real space, honest space. And in that space, I began to think about how I'd lived for the last 20 years. How many times had I sacrificed comfort for Catherine's ease? How many dinners missed savings, rerouted retirements, postponed all, so she wouldn't stumble? She didn't just steal $42,000. She stole decades of unspoken forgiveness. That afternoon, I drove to the attorney's office. Now I know what you might be thinking. But Josephine, you said you weren't pressing charges. And I'm not. But there are other forms of protection. Longer-lasting ones. Ones that don't require courtrooms to be effective. I met with Ms. Brennan, a tall, elegant estate attorney, who reminded me of myself 30 years ago, controlled sharp and tired of people underestimating her. She offered tea. I declined. I want to amend my estate plan, I said. To exclude your daughter, she asked. I didn't flinch. No, I said. To protect myself from her. She nodded with the kind of understanding that doesn't need words. We discussed setting up a living trust one Catherine couldn't touch without ironclad triggers. We put property deeds in secure entities. We rerouted access. We made it legal. By the time I left her office, my entire life was sealed in a vault of strategy, and all she had left were memories of what could have been hers. Not because I was spiteful, because I was finally aware. On the way home, I drove past the church where I used to take Catherine on Sundays. She would squirm during the hymns and whisper too loud during sermons. One time she asked me why the people in the front row always looked sad. I told her, because they're trying to figure out how to forgive someone who isn't sorry. Now I understood what that meant. When I got home, I found a cardboard box sitting on my front porch. No return label, just my name written in a rushed hand. Inside was a stack of items. A silk scarf I'd gifted Catherine 5 Christmases ago. A framed photo of us from her college graduation. And wrapped in tissue paper, my old credit card snapped clean in half. No note, no apology, just the quiet return of what she couldn't keep. I didn't cry, not out of coldness, but because the grief had passed. This wasn't mourning. This was confirmation. I packed the items back in the box and slid it into the garage. I didn't need to display them. I didn't need to burn them either. They just didn't belong here anymore. That night, I sat down to write again. Not a message. Not a letter. A record. I opened a fresh notebook and titled the first page, How I Got My Life Back. I wrote, "You don't reclaim your peace all at once. You take it back minute by minute, boundary by boundary, betrayal by betrayal, until one day your life fits you again." The clock ticked, the wind shifted, and I felt my soul stretch back into itself. At 10:17 p.m. my landline rang. It was Catherine. Again. I stared at the name glowing on the screen. And this time I answered. "Hello," I said, even-toned. Silence. Then, "You win." I didn't ask what she meant. She went on. "You've always had the power, haven't you?" I just didn't know where it came from. I said nothing. "I thought I could manipulate you forever, that you'd bend like always. But you didn't. Not this time. I don't know whether to hate you or admire you." I still didn't speak. Finally, she said, "You don't have to worry. I won't ask you for anything again." And that strangely felt like the first honest promise she'd made in years. "Good night, Catherine," I said and hung up, not out of cruelty, but completion, because closure doesn't always come with an apology. Sometimes it arrives in the form of surrender. And that night I slept without dreaming. 2 weeks passed. The garden bloomed. The phone stayed quiet. And for the first time in years, my days belonged entirely to me. I didn't realize how much mental real estate Catherine had occupied. How often I had replayed our conversations, rewritten her mistakes in my mind, tried to find versions of her that made more sense than the one standing in front of me. But now there was space. Space for late morning walks, for rereading old books I loved, for making soup from scratch, and listening to Chopin with the windows open. And yet, the space didn't mean absence, because Catherine still lived in the corners of everything, but not in the way that hurt anymore. One afternoon, while dusting the top shelf of the bookcase, I found a small photograph tucked behind a collection of legal thrillers. It was of us, me and her, taken at a summer fair when she was 11. We were holding cotton candy, her hair in braids, her cheeks flushed from laughing. I looked tired but happy. I stared at that photo for a long time. Was that the last version of her I truly trusted? Or was that the last version of me who still believed I could fix her? I slid the photo into my red folder, not to mourn it, but to honor what once was. That evening, I received an email. Subject: Final confirmation. Fraud case closed. It stated that the investigation had concluded. The bank had officially reversed all the charges. They had issued notices to other institutions within their network. Catherine's name was now attached to a fraud alert tag that would follow her for a long time. It was done. Quietly, permanently, and legally. The kind of ending no apology could erase. I printed the email, filed it in the red folder behind the letter she had sent me from the coast. Then I took a deep breath and locked the folder in my filing cabinet. It was time to stop reopening the wound. The next morning, I received a knock at the door. Not a call, not a text. An old-fashioned knock. I hesitated, then opened it. It was Madeline, the friend of Catherine's, who had texted me weeks ago. She looked younger than I expected, maybe in her late 20s. Casual blouse, tired eyes, polite smile. "Miss Larkspur?" she asked. "Yes. I'm sorry to show up unannounced. I wanted to thank you." That caught me off guard. "Thank me," she nodded. "For holding her accountable. I didn't know how to say it over text, but I think you did the right thing. I was on that trip, And when the card got declined and everything started unraveling, Catherine acted like you had betrayed her. Not once did she say sorry. Not to you. Not to us. She lied, Ms. Larkspur. Repeatedly. I studied the young woman's face. She looked pained. Ashamed even. She told us you said she could use the card. Madeline went on. That it was some kind of retirement gift. But when everything fell apart, she turned cold. She said you were too old to understand the lifestyle she deserved. I said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. Madeline hesitated, then pulled something from her bag, a small velvet pouch. She pawned this when things got tight. But I bought it back before I flew home. I think it belongs to you. She placed it in my hand. I opened the pouch. Inside was a simple gold bracelet, not valuable in money, but mine. A gift from Richard. Our 20th anniversary. I hadn't even noticed it was missing. She wore it on the ship, Madeline said softly, like it meant nothing. I nodded. Thank you, Madeline, for returning this. And for your honesty. She's lost a lot more than money, she said almost sadly. She just doesn't realize it yet. I watched Madeline walk back to her car, disappearing down the street like a footnote in a chapter that had finally ended. Back inside, I sat at the kitchen table and laid the bracelet on the table in front of me. And for a moment I wept. Not for Catherine, not for the betrayal, but for the version of me who almost let it all slide. The woman who out of habit might have wired the money, made the excuses, ignored the theft. She was gone now, and in her place was someone I trusted again. I slipped the bracelet on. It felt heavier than I remembered. But also, right. That night, I wrote a new entry in my notebook. When they steal from you, they expect your silence. But when you respond with strength instead, they lose something far more valuable than what they took. They lose access, and access is power. The bracelet stayed on my wrist for days. It wasn't just jewelry anymore. It had become something symbolic. A reminder that I had boundaries now, that even kindness has walls. And love. Real love is not the same thing as permission. That week, I cleared out the spare bedroom. It used to be Catherine's long ago. Over the years, I'd kept it preserved in a kind of hopeful nostalgia. Her old bookshelf, a few childhood photos, the vanity she once painted lilac and covered in glitter. But it was time. I boxed up the keepsakes, labeled what should go to storage, what could be donated, what should be discarded. In the bottom drawer of her desk, I found a notebook. Inside, to my surprise, were letters. Not addressed to me, but to herself. Drafts of apologies never sent. Journals of resentment. Rants about being misunderstood. Some were ugly. Some heartbreaking. One entry caught me off guard. Mom never let me grow up. She protected me so much that I stopped knowing how to protect myself. And now I keep waiting for her to save me, even when I know she won't. That one sat with me, not because it excused her behavior, but because it revealed something important. She wasn't just stealing money. She was stealing rescue, again and again. I closed the journal, placed it back in the drawer. It wasn't my job to finish her sentences anymore. That evening, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a printed email, odd I thought, and a sticky note attached in Catherine's handwriting. The email was from a collections agency. Apparently, she had tried applying for a new credit card with a different bank, and her application had triggered the fraud flag. She had been denied, then flagged again when the bank cross-referenced with the initial report. The sticky note read, "You didn't just cut off the card. You cut me off from everything." She was right. I had, but not as revenge. As a correction. Sometimes cutting someone off isn't punishment, it's protection. For both of you. Later that night, I received a call from a number I recognized. My cousin Ellen. We hadn't spoken in a while. She lived in Oregon, always busy with her grandkids. "Josephine," she said, "I just got a call from Catherine." I braced myself. She said you froze her out. That you ruined her credit, embarrassed her, cut her out of your life. "And what did you say?" I asked. I said, "Well, honey, sounds like she finally grew a spine. About damn time." Ish. I laughed. The first genuine deep laugh in weeks. Ellen continued. She didn't take that well. Hung up on me. But I just wanted to call and say, "I'm proud of you. You've always been too generous for your own good." I thanked her. And when we hung up, I realized word was getting around. Catherine was spinning her version of events, but I didn't feel the need to correct her, because the people who mattered knew, and the people who didn't matter. That weekend, I hosted a dinner, just a few close friends, people who'd stuck around through the years, even when I was too wrapped up in motherhood to reciprocate. We cooked together, laughed over old stories, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was holding something back. During dessert, I shared the truth. I told them what had happened: the theft, the silence, the system I trusted more than my own voice. And the outcome? They listened, not with judgment, but with solidarity. One of them, Marjorie, whose son had once forged her signature to lease a sports car, nodded slowly and said, "You didn't lose a daughter, Joe. You reclaimed yourself." And in that moment, surrounded by warmth and wine and gentle laughter, I believed her. That night, as I washed dishes by the window, I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflection. Not the mother I had been, not the victim I had become, but the woman I was now, whole, wiser, and no longer waiting for an apology to move forward. Because sometimes justice doesn't come with sirens. It comes with stillness, and the sound of your own name finally spoken with respect. Fall crept in softly that year. The leaves outside my window began to yellow, the air thinning in a way only October knows. Mornings were quieter. Mornings were mine. And with the turning of the season, I began to reclaim more than just space. I began to reclaim ritual. Every Friday, I walked to the farmer's market down the road, not to buy anything extravagant, just honey, a bouquet of eucalyptus, maybe a few apples if they looked crisp enough. Simple things, grounded things. The man who sold the honey recognized me after a few visits. "You've got that quiet kind of strength," he said one morning. "The kind people don't see coming until they feel it." I smiled. He didn't know my story. But maybe he didn't have to. Strength doesn't always shout. That afternoon, I received a call from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. An hour later, another came in. This one I answered. "Mom." It was Catherine again. Her voice sounded raw, not angry, not cold, just tired. "I know you don't owe me anything. I need to talk." I sat down at the kitchen table, the same one where the bank statement had first landed. The scene of the crime, in a way. But now it was a place of decision. "I'm listening," I said. She hesitated. "Then I'm not going to justify what I did. I won't ask you for money. I guess I needed to hear your voice again." I said nothing. She continued. "You did what you had to do. I see that now. It hurt. God, it hurt. But it also woke me up." Still, I waited. "I got a job," she added. "A real one. Office admin. Small company. But they took a chance on me. I didn't tell them about the fraud stuff. I just needed a fresh start." I could hear the edge of shame in her tone. "I'm in a shared apartment. Tiny room. Mattress on the floor. But I'm paying rent. With money I earned." I exhaled slowly. "Good," I said. And meant it. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said, softer now. "But I hope someday you'll be open to something again." I thought about it. About all the versions of her I'd known: the child, the manipulator, the liar, the lost girl. And I realized something painful. I couldn't trust her again. Yet. But I could acknowledge the part of her trying to crawl out from the wreckage. "I'm glad you're trying," I said. "That's more than you've done in a long time." She didn't push further. Didn't ask for help. Didn't beg. And that more than anything gave me pause. "Can I write to you sometime?" she asked. "Letters," I said, measured. "Only letters. For now." There was a long silence. Then, "Okay." We hung up, not as mother and daughter, but as two women who had both been burned by the same fire, just on opposite sides of the flame. Later that night, I sat in the living room with a quilt over my lap and a cup of tea beside me. I wasn't proud. Not in a triumphant way, but in a quiet, weary, resolved way. I had survived her betrayal, and I had not become bitter. That's its own kind of victory. I opened my notebook and wrote, "Forgiveness isn't the door you open for them. It's the window you crack open for yourself to breathe again." Then I turned the page and drew a single check mark, because sometimes healing isn't loud. Sometimes it looks like a blank page with room for more. The first letter came a week later. It was addressed in Catherine's handwriting, still the same loopy J she used on school assignments as a girl. No return address. Just a stamp slightly crooked in the corner. I let it sit on the table for a day before opening it. Not because I was afraid. Because I had learned the value of waiting. The difference between reaction and response. The next morning, with tea in hand, I sliced the envelope open and pulled out a neatly folded sheet of lined paper. Dear Mom, I didn't know how hard it would be to write this without asking for something. But here it is. I'm not asking for anything. I want to tell you about my life. Just that. I wake up at 6 every day now. Not because I have to, but because I want to. I like the quiet before the city gets loud. I walk to work. It's not far, just 12 minutes. I listen to music that isn't sad. I answer phones, send emails, make coffee. I earn $540 a week before taxes. I'm proud of that. I make my own meals now. I burnt my first grilled cheese and cried about it. Then laughed because I realized no one was going to fix it. I went to bed hungry that night. I haven't done that again. I don't post anymore. There's nothing to prove. I think about that bracelet a lot. The one you wore at Dad's funeral. The one I took without asking. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't change anything. But I want to say it. If you don't write back, I understand. Just know I'm trying to become someone you'd let in again. Love. Catherine. I read it once. Then again. And then I set it down. I didn't cry. What I felt wasn't sadness. It was something warmer, though. Still too fragile to name. That evening, I lit a candle in the kitchen and began to write. Dear Catherine, I received your letter. Thank you for not asking for anything. That alone tells me you're different than the girl who took my card. I don't know where we're headed. I'm not ready to talk on the phone. But this letter's this I can manage. I want to hear about your job, your meals, your walks. I want to know if you've learned how to cook grilled cheese without burning it. I want honesty, not perfection. Don't ask for forgiveness. Just write me about who you are now. That's more important than who you were. Take care of yourself. Mom. I sealed it, stamped it, and placed it in the outgoing mail bin before I could change my mind. And then something unexpected happened. I smiled. Not because I was healed. Not because I trusted her again. But because for the first time in years we were speaking in truth. No scripts. No manipulation. No credit cards. Just ink. And maybe someday redemption. 2 weeks passed. Then another letter arrived. No drama. No confessions. Just stories. Her boss complimented her spreadsheet. She found a used dresser on the street and cleaned it up. She learned how to make rice that wasn't sticky. She stopped biting her nails. I wrote back, and so it began. A quiet exchange between two women once at war. No promises. No timelines. Just the slow rebuild of something neither of us had the words for yet. And maybe that was enough. Because healing doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives in lowercase handwriting folded twice and sealed with nothing but effort. By December, the letters had become routine. One every 10 days. No declarations. No demands. Just two women writing as if they were strangers, learning one another for the first time. She told me about the older woman in her apartment complex who taught her to make lentil soup. She told me about her new habit of buying a single flower every Friday and placing it in an old jam jar by her window. She told me how her favorite part of the day was watching people go by from her bus stop trying to guess their stories. There was no mention of the cruise, no echo of the credit card, no tugging at the past. And maybe that was its own apology. I never asked where she found the discipline. I didn't need to, because I knew loss is a brutal but thorough teacher. Still, I hadn't sent a gift. Not for Thanksgiving. Not for her birthday in October. And especially not for Christmas. She didn't ask. But a week before the holidays, a package arrived for me. No name on the outside, just a return address I didn't recognize. Inside was a small ceramic dish, imperfectly glazed. Blue and gold with the words, "I'm learning." Tucked underneath was a note. Mom, I made this at the Community Arts Center. It's lopsided and I burned my fingers twice. But it's mine. And I didn't steal it. I don't expect anything from you this season. I just wanted to send something I made with my own hands. Thank you for teaching me eventually the difference between love and entitlement. I didn't cry, But I did place the dish by my bed next to the candle I light every night. A quiet altar to growth, to patience, to earned connection. On Christmas morning, the phone rang. Not the cell. The old rotary phone in the hallway ringing like memory. I answered. "Good morning," she said, her voice cautious. "Clear. Merry Christmas," I replied. A pause. "Did you get the dish?" "I did," I said. "It's beautiful." Another pause. "This one's softer. I didn't think you'd actually pick up." "I almost didn't." She laughed a small broken laugh. "I'm glad you did." We didn't talk long. Just enough. She told me about her plans to work through the holiday. Double pay. She sounded proud of that. And I was proud of that. Before we hung up, she asked, "Do you think one day we might see each other again?" I didn't answer right away. Then, one day isn't today, but one day, maybe? It was the most honest thing I could offer. And it was enough. After the call, I went into the kitchen and brewed a fresh pot of coffee. I made scrambled eggs, buttery toast. I poured orange juice into the fancy crystal glass I hadn't used in years. Then I sat down alone at the table and felt full. Not because someone was there, but because someone wasn't, because I had finally learned to love without martyrdom, to forgive without forgetting, to hold space without being hollowed out. She may never be the daughter I once dreamed of, but she was trying. And I was no longer her rescuer. I was her witness. And that somehow felt holier. The new year arrived quietly. No fireworks, no resolutions, just frost on the windows and a kind of internal calm I hadn't known in decades. On January 2nd, I received a letter from Catherine that was shorter than usual. "Mom, I've been accepted into a local certification program. Office management and bookkeeping. It's part-time, but I'll still be working." I used part of my savings for the first class. It felt good to spend my own money on something real. I read it 3 times. Not because I didn't believe her, but because I did. And that surprised me. Later that week, I stood in line at the post office waiting to mail my reply. There was an older gentleman ahead of me trying to tape shut a battered cardboard box. The clerk was busy, the tape dispenser kept slipping. I stepped forward without thinking. "Here," I said, taking the tape and smoothing it for him. He looked up, his face soft. "Kind. You remind me of someone," he said. "My sister." She didn't say much, but when she did, people listened. I smiled politely and said nothing, because I'm learning to receive quiet compliments without turning them away. At home, I sat at the desk and wrote Catherine back. "Congratulations. I'm proud of your choice. Learning how to handle money is the same thing as learning how to handle yourself. And if you want to pass this program, here's my advice. Pay attention to the small numbers. They always tell the big story." I sealed the envelope and walked it to the mailbox. The air was crisp, the sky a thin watercolor blue. And for the first time, the act of sending something to her didn't feel like risk. It felt like ritual. That evening, I opened my old journal and turned to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote, "Reconstruction," because that's what this was now. Not reconciliation, not redemption, but a quiet, deliberate rebuilding. Brick by brick, letter by letter. The next few weeks passed with ease. She sent more updates about how she helped reorganize her office's filing system and how her boss had started trusting her with small budgets. One letter included a sketch she'd done of her bedroom, a small room tidy with a milk crate for a bookshelf and a tiny cactus on the windowsill. She wrote, "It's not much, but it's mine, and no one had to lose something for me to have it." That line stopped me cold. It was the first time she had truly acknowledged the theft, not just of money, but of dignity, of trust. That night, I sat by the fireplace, the ceramic dish beside me, a single tulip inside. I remembered the early days, her tantrums as a child, her tears as a teenager, her rehearsed apologies as an adult, and I realized she was finally off script. One evening, while reading in the sunroom, I heard a knock on the door. Not urgent, not aggressive, just present. I opened it slowly. Catherine stood there. No suitcase, no tears, just a small envelope in her hand. "I know you said letters," she said, "but I didn't want to send this one." I stepped aside, silent. She entered like someone visiting a memory, quiet, careful. We didn't sit. She handed me the envelope and said, "I'll go." I just wanted to give this to you in person. And then she turned and walked away. No performance, no expectations, just presence. I closed the door, waited, then opened the envelope. Inside was a check. Yan 327. Fimte, a partial repayment. For the things I knew I took. More to come. No note. Just numbers. And that's when I cried. Because for the first time, Catherine was finally speaking my language. I kept the check on my desk for 3 days before depositing it. Not out of hesitation, but reverence. Because this wasn't just money. It was a fragment of trust translated into numbers. It was evidence that she didn't just feel sorry. She was ready to own the damage. When I finally visited the bank, I handed it to the teller with steady hands. She glanced at it, then at me. "Nice to see repayment," she said gently. I smiled. It took a while, but she's finding her way. On my walk home, I noticed a new coffee shop had opened around the corner. There was a sign in the window. "We believe people can start over, one cup at a time." I almost laughed, because that was exactly what Catherine was doing. Starting over one letter, one job, one mistake at a time. That evening, I lit a candle and opened her latest letter. This one was different. "Mom, I've started volunteering on Sundays, a nonprofit that teaches budgeting to single moms. I sit with women who remind me of you, and girls who remind me of me. I tell them how dangerous it is to confuse love with access. I don't mention your name, but you're in every story I share." I closed my eyes and took a breath. Forgiveness is never loud. Sometimes it sounds like a whisper inside someone else's life. The following week, I hosted my book club for the first time in 2 years. We talked about the remains of the day, and someone asked if it's possible to get your dignity back after you've given it away. I said yes, and everyone went quiet. After the group left, I found myself tidying the house with a kind of softness I hadn't known since Catherine was small. No tension behind every movement, just peace. Around midnight, I walked outside to take out the trash and saw a figure across the street. Catherine, sitting on the bus bench, a book in her lap, not coming to the door, not asking to stay, just being near. I didn't call out, didn't wave, but I left the porch light on, and when I woke the next morning, she was gone. Yet something in me had shifted again. She wasn't trying to be forgiven anymore. She was learning how to live with what she'd done without demanding to be absolved. And that in its own way was healing for both of us. That week, I visited my attorney one final time. "I want to make a few changes," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "To the trust?" "No," I said. "To the will?" We sat across from one another. She clicked her pen and waited. "I don't want Catherine to expect anything I said, but I want her to earn a place again. I want a clause." "What kind of clause?" "A conditional gift," I replied. "One triggered only if she continues to show growth. Not perfection, but accountability." She nodded slowly. "You're not cutting her out. You're building a path back." I smiled. "Exactly." The papers were drawn up. The clause was simple. "If by the time of my passing, my daughter Catherine Larkspur has maintained stable income, demonstrated continued repayment efforts, and preserved respectful correspondence with my estate, she shall inherit the amount equal to what was once taken, adjusted for inflation plus interest." I left the office feeling lighter. It wasn't just about consequences anymore. It was about belief and boundaries. That night, I wrote to Catherine. "I made some changes today. You'll find out one day. I won't say what they are. Only this. I see you. Keep becoming the woman you're learning to be. And remember, rebuilding trust is like paying off debt. The first payment is always the hardest. But after that, every bit counts." I signed it, folded it, sealed it, and smiled. Because this wasn't just closure, it was construction. And she was building something real. Spring came early that year. The trees outside my window blushed with soft green, the kind that always reminds me of second chances. Life pushing through branches that once looked brittle, dead even, but were simply waiting for the right time. One morning, I opened my mailbox to find an envelope not from Catherine, but from her employer. Inside was a folded letter on formal stationery. "To whom it may concern." We are pleased to share that Catherine Larkspur has completed her probationary period with us and is now a full-time salaried employee. She has shown consistent punctuality, remarkable diligence, and a sincere interest in growing her skills. We understand there may have been difficulties in her past. We are writing today not to erase those but to affirm how far she has come since. She recently initiated a workplace program to help young staff members avoid financial mistakes, and her transparency has opened a new level of trust among our team. Please consider this a testament not only to her progress, but to the person she is becoming. Sincerely, Lauren Chen, Director of Operations. I sat down slowly, the letter in my lap. For a long time, I didn't move. I just breathed. Deeply, deliberately, as if my lungs finally had permission to stop bracing for disappointment. That afternoon, I walked into Catherine's old room now, a sunlit, empty guest space, and opened the closet. I found the journal I'd tucked away months ago, the one with her old apologies, her anger, her excuses. I flipped to the last page, tore it out, and threw it away. Then I opened to the first blank page and wrote, "She became someone else, not a stranger, not the child I once knew, but a woman who chose growth over shame, and that is enough." That evening, just before dusk, I received a knock at the door. Not urgent, not hesitant, a steady, polite knock. When I opened it, Catherine stood there, clean jeans, a dark green blouse, her hair pulled back. Not polished, not perfect, but grounded. In her hands, a pie, homemade, the crust uneven, the edges slightly burned. "I made this," she said, then added with a nervous smile, "It's terrible, but I made it." I stepped aside, and for the first time in over a year, she entered our home quietly, respectfully. She didn't look around with nostalgia. She didn't ask for anything. She just sat down, laid the pie on the counter, and folded her hands. We didn't talk about the past. We talked about soup recipes, budgeting tricks, how hard it is to keep houseplants alive. At one point, she reached across the table not for my hand, but for the sugar bowl, and I smiled, because the only thing she reached for was something that belonged to everyone. We ate pie. It was terrible, but it was ours. As she left, she turned back at the doorway and said softly, "You were right. Numbers don't lie." I nodded. "But people can change." She smiled, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a performance. It felt like truth. That night, I wrote the final line in my journal. She stole my card, but I reclaimed my voice, and in doing so, I taught her how to earn her own. They say justice is loud, but I've learned that the quiet kinds are more permanent. When Catherine took my card and spent $42,000 on a life she hadn't earned, she wasn't just stealing from my bank account. She was stealing from my identity, my role as provider, protector, and parent. And for a long time, I let her, but this time I chose the law over leniency, evidence over excuses, silence over screaming. And in that choice, I didn't just stop her. I found me again. This story isn't about revenge. It's about reclamation, of boundaries, of dignity, of the sacred truth that love without respect isn't love at all. Catherine is still rebuilding, and so am I. But now we build in parallel, not codependent, not tangled. She earns, I trust. And slowly we meet in the middle. So if you've ever been betrayed, let this be your reminder. You don't have to burn bridges to walk away. You can just quietly close the gate and open the one that leads back to yourself. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is just smile.